Hey everybody, Scout Crafty here again. Midweek Wednesday. Boy, have we got a good show planned for you today. On Monday's episode, I showed you what I picked up at the Long Island Tool Meet. A bunch of older tools, a lot of them $5 tools from my good buddy Chris. And picked up a lot of tools. And I asked you, what tool would you like to see or restored first? And overwhelmingly, you picked the box ruler, or rulers that were dirty and needed cleaning. And we're going to hit that on Friday. Friday, we're going to do that because you overwhelmingly wanted to see the box rulers done, and I was pretty surprised. But I took advantage of the long weekend between shows here for me to hit 3 items that I thought that would be overlooked, and they most likely were, except for my buddy James P. in the shop. But most of you overlook these items, and these are real gems, hidden gems, what I like to call them. I'm so excited to get started to show you because, you know, when you're doing the restorations or fooling around down the shop, as long as I have been, you kind of can look at a tool and see what's waiting to come out. And I picked these 2 of these tools because I said, boy, these are just absolutely beautiful. And I think you're going to be real excited when we do them. Hopefully it'll come out nice. And I picked a third tool that we're going to do because we're going to be using that for an upcoming project I'm so excited to tell you about, which I'll probably tell you about on Friday. So let's get started right away. I'm really psyched for this show. Okay, there are 3 items here that I want to get started on because they're really not badly pitted or anything, and they should clean up nicely. This one here, and again, this is almost a stationary scribe that goes on usually a granite plate, and you could do some markings. There's a bunch of things you could use this for. The nut here usually was a knurled nut. This one here is added on, and the problem is a lot of times this was an unusual thread. I'm hoping it's not, but a lot of times it was. So we're going to have to check out the threading on that, see what we can do. Next we have this here, this Protractor. Most likely Starrett, I can't tell. Could be Lufkin, one of the good brands. We're going to dump this in Evaporust. We'll see if we can't loosen it up just a little bit before we put it in. Really nice. Hopefully that will be usable again. And then we have the scraper that we're going to be using on an upcoming project very shortly. We'll just take this apart, screw this out here, and put this whole thing in Evaporust because this all has to be cleaned. Now, just as we figured, this is an odd thread. Rather than make a new one, I'm going to see if I can't run a rethreading die down here and go to a normal thread. This is a 1/4x20. It's a coarse thread. We'll see if we can't do it rather than make a new one. Sometimes you could be, if the thread is close enough, we'll see what we can do. I'll put it in a vise and rethread it. Okay, now if you look closely, we chased the threads with a 1/4x20 die. And what happens is if it's not the exact threads, the thread will be a little bit loose fitting. And I'll show you here. When we'll put, this is a 1/4x20 nut. Okay, when we put this on, if you notice, there's a little bit of wiggle room, right? So you say, well, you know, that's not a tight fit. That's fine, because now when you're making your new thread, whatever, I'm going to make a knob, instead of using a number 7 drill, which is what you normally use to make a 1/4x20 tap, you use a slightly smaller drill, which will make the threads give you a more engagement, and you'll see it'll be a tighter fit. So this will be fine instead of having to make a new one, because all it's doing here is really, it's just a clamp. This clamps on this item, and I'll show you that when it's together. So when we make the new hand knob for this, we'll adjust it to these threads. That's the beauty of not buying off-the-shelf stuff. Next, before we put the Protractor in, I would like to loosen these nuts up because this whole thing spins in there, and I'll show you how that. So if I could possibly loosen this up before it goes into the Evaporust, it would be better. So I put a little 50-50, a little bit of heat. Now I don't want to ruin this knurling, so I'm going to take a little a piece of leather with some pliers and see if I can just loosen that. Here's just a piece. You can use any kind of leather. Really helps. Place it around here like this, and then put your channel lock on here like this. Make sure the leather is between the jaws and just give it a little turn. There we go. We got movement and we didn't damage it. So we just want a little bit of movement. We did it on this one already. We're good to go. Okay, again, we're trying to disassemble as much of this as we can get apart before we put it into the evaporust. We took off the level that was here. We took a pick. We got in between the threads here, thank goodness. And look at this. The X-Lite was able to get those screws, pop them right out. So we're good there. Now, this part spins within this, and it's cast iron. Now, I contemplated bringing it to the dake, but the problem is when you push it on cast, it could break. Sometimes you need a quick blow. But now that I took the level off, I don't have to worry about adding heat. So I'm going to add heat to the outer rim of this. That hopefully will enlarge it a little bit. And then I'm going to, with a brass hammer and some tin, try and tap this out of there. But this whole thing's going to get hot, so you got to be aware of that and make sure you have something holding it so you don't burn your hand. Okay, now what we've been doing is taking a piece of aluminum can and a brass hammer. These small brass hammers come in handy. And the reason is because brass and aluminum are both softer than the steel. So you have a double protection. Place the can on the inside here and slightly tap all the way around until this popped out. And this was all rusted in here. That's why with between the heat, some 50-50, which you can't be stingy with. And now, remember, this was solid in there. But now, once we clean this all up, now we could put this in the evaporust because it's almost all, everything apart. And then we'll come back and wire brush it, and it should come out nice. Here we go. This is about 6 hours in the evaporust, and then wire brushed on the wire wheel. Now, tomorrow we'll do a little bit more, some polishing, some final sanding, coming along nicely, aren't they? Now, you remember what this scraper looked like before we started. Okay, we're calling this one done. Now, this was just a cleanup because we're going to be using this for the project I'm going to tell you about that's coming up that I'm super excited about. Now, this, you could see here, it wasn't readable before, but it says the A.E. Bennett Specialty Manufacturing Company, adjustable, patented January 5th, 1909 scraper, Buffalo, New York. Isn't that nice? And how this works, it's adjustable in many different ways. The blade can be adjusted in and out. It's got two bevels on here. You usually do it with the bevel facing you. In other words, the scraping part is going to be dragging, so that's the sharp part you want. I didn't sharpen it or anything. I will have to touch it up before we use it. But how you use this, again, depending on what if you're going to draw a scrape, you can hear it on here. You can hear it dragging. It's very nicely made. You loosen this up. You can adjust the different angles, whichever angle you're comfortable with. When you get it in here, the blade, when you adjust it, when you go to adjust it, it loosens up the blade here. You tighten the blade with that and here. So you got two ways to tighten it. One here, giving you the angle, and then dragging it. Let me show you on this piece of wood over here. I just clamped down a piece of wood here. I'm just going to show you. Now, again, I don't have this at the angle I would normally put. Let me show you. I'm just going to drag it along here. Okay, look at this. Do you see that? I'm going to do it again. Look at that. It's just taking off the very top finish. Now, you can see what's the remnants on the blade. What I'm going to use this for is for scraping varnish off and things like that. And also for scraping if I use any paint thinner or paint remover. So that's why I didn't do a full blown kind of restoration, because I want it as a user tool. So that's number one. Next up, you remember the condition of this antique surface scribe. I'm calling this project done. Wow, look at this, huh? Is that not a piece of work? And you can see here what it is. It's a antique surface marking scribe. Now, typically, this would be used on what's called a surface plate. A surface plate is a piece of granite, depending on the size depending on the shop you have. But typically, they're for homeowner use, they're like 9x12 or 12x12, something like that. They're usually 2 to 3 inches thick. That gives them the stability. And a surface plate, the reason they call it that is because the surface is ground, the piece of granite, to, depending on what its rating is. Now, I have two. I have a A rating and a B rating one. The A rating one that I have is good to 1/1000th of an inch across the surface, so that's really straight and flat. And the B rating one, I think, is good to about 3/1000th one. I use that in the leather working upstairs in the attic, you might have seen. So what they're used for is for layout. A lot of times when you have to lay out a specific item, this was used back in the day to lay out items. And I'll show you. And look what we did here. Look at that knob. I'm pretty proud of that knurling on that knob. This is steel. And again, when I drilled this one out, I drilled this one out to a, remember, a number 7 drill is the normal drill you would use for 1/4 inch. I went a slightly smaller drill bit so that I took away that play that was in there. So now this is absolutely solid, locks up, very tight, and there's no play in here whatsoever. You need this to be tight because you don't want this moving on you when you're doing critical layout work. Let me show you how you would normally use something like this. Now, typically they would have different grades of your granite surface plate in a shop. One with the real good grade would be in the tool room, where they don't allow any grinding or dust or anything, and it's always covered with a cover. And then you might have one on the floor that's maybe a B rating or something that's just done for general work, just to have something that's flat and true. A poor man's surface plate is this piece of tile. If you go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or something, you look under the tile section, you can get a nice flat piece of tile. And what you do is you bring a straight edge, lay it across, and look. This one here cost me about $4. I use this for all kinds of things, especially glue ups, things like that I want it to be flat. And this is absolutely flat. So let's say we wanted to use this. We're going to show you how to use this. Would typically slide across here on here, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use this to find the center of a piece of round stock. Okay, so here's our piece of round stock, and what we did is we covered the end with some Dykem layout fluid. This is in Scout Crafter Red. They also come in, usually you see it in blue, but you can use a magic mark or anything just to give a coating on there. Now we're going to use a V-block. This V-block I have is a low profile V-block. We're going to use that. You can use any V-block. You place your stock on here, and now we're going to raise this up here to just about the center, you know, like around here. We're not going to go crazy. We're just getting it close, okay? And the reason that is because now I'm going to drag this across. I'm going to hold this down. I'm going to drag this across the end, holding this flat here like this, drag it across, okay? Once I drag it across, I'm going to turn this vertical. Okay, now we turned it vertical. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, drag it across. I'm going to do it again, hold that line vertical, drag it across, hold this line vertical, and drag it across. Now, if you look closely, you'll see the lines are scribed. Let me see if I can get it so it picks up on camera. You can see those lines are scribed there. Now, if you connect the corners of that center box, that'll give you the exact center of this round. Now, we joined those two corners. That's the exact center of this round, right in the middle of that X. Now, let's say we wanted to get 2 inches up. We wanted to find 2 inches up on this circular round. I'll show you how you do that. Now we put some Dykem around, somewhere around the 2-inch mark around here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our layout. Now this is a combination square. We're going to be talking about this more in a minute. But if you ever noticed, a lot of these squares, if you notice, the lines are imprinted with little divots in there. And the reason that's like that is because this is how this is supposed to be used. When I put this on this, let's say, is a surface plate, and I take this here, I take this tip here, and I put it exactly in the 2-inch mark, into that line. Now, if you look closely, that's going directly into that line for 2 inches. You could feel it. And some of the good scribes that they have fine adjustments, but I have this set exactly in the 2-inch line there. You could see, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take this circular here, and we're going to just turn this around. We're going to drag it across, and that'll be 2 inches off of the bottom. Here we go. Here we go. That's exactly 2-inch mark from here. From here to here is exactly 2 inches. Let's measure it. Another way you could use this is we have a side with a hook on it, and you can get in or around things. But if you want to see, again, if this is level all the way across, you could bring this up to here and measure if there's any gap. You can look under with a flashlight and see if there's any gap, and then slide it across, and you could see how close it is to being level. There's all kinds of things you could do with this. Obviously, this is an old-timey tool, and the gentleman or the machinist that used to use these were extremely skilled. And just like when using spring calipers, you got to get used to it. I'm just crazy about this thing. Okay, last up, you remember this rusty hunk of junk? Well, it's a surprise. And we're calling this project done. Boy, this is the one I'm most proud of. Look at this. Look how this came out. I had such a good time doing this. And this took me the better part of a day to do. But I really brought this back to original condition without any kind of modifications on it. Look how beautiful it is. The numbers all came out. This thing is just a work of art, isn't it? Starrett No.12 combination square. And what this does, it's meant to go with a steel rule, a straight rule that goes into here. And I will get that. They're always available, but I have one I can use to show you. But how you would use this as a protractor is you loosen up these screws like this. And you remember that was frozen in there. But now, when we loosen it up, look how nicely this turns now. I oiled it up. It's got Starrett and mineral oil on there, but just beautiful. And here's the reader over here. And again, you tighten it up. It's got a bubble level in here that, I don't know if you could see it. I got that bubble level is super accurate. Really nice. Let me show you how this works. And again, unlike the original, I polished the top here. I just think that looks so much better to go around the top. They usually painted that. But isn't that just beautiful? Let me show you with the straight edge how that Starrett was always careful to make things that wouldn't interact with other companies. They always had their own threads, their own sizes, so that you couldn't buy replacement parts other than Starrett. But their ruler is thicker. It's also a ground cast material where this might be stamped. Again, the letters are maybe printed on here where with a Starrett, they're engraved. And how you would work this in, if you wanted 90 degrees, you would put it on 90. You would slip your ruler in. Now you have a 90-degree angle. If you loosen this up, you could move this back and forth. Again, this isn't the right one, so it's going to be a little bit slippery. But if you want to check an angle, you loosen up the ring, and you could check an angle. Whatever angle you might have, you could check. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could use this particular protractor, again, with the correct rule. But there is a hook in there, and I do have that part, which is usually the hard part to get. Now I just need the steel rule, which is usually easy to come across. But there we go, the combination square. Now, the good news is you could still get this Starrett combination head. The problem is the price is a little bit pricey just for that part. Or you could buy the whole combination set right here that comes with everything. However, that will set you back a little bit more. Either way, they're great products. Okay, so in closing, I know I'm not really well-versed or well-practiced in using some of those old machinist tools, but I have to tell you that in the hands of an experienced, old-timey machinist, they can be every much as accurate as some of the guys with dial indicators, things like that. Those guys were good back in the day. I mean, to the 10,000ths of an inch with some of them old tools, you know, scribes and whatnot. It's amazing. Anyway, which one did you enjoy the most? And let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for tuning in. And on Friday, we'll start with the box rulers and some other stuff. Hope you have a great day. Take care now. Bye-bye.